Good afternoon. Today is August 6th, 2018, and this is the regular meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Madam Clerk?
Roll call. Before I proceed with the roll call, Commissioner Camargo and Commissioner Kadikian will not be attending today's meeting. President Lau,
Present.
Commissioner Hale,
Here.
Commissioner Vanessian.
Here.
Okay. Next item.
2A, approval of the minutes for the June 4, 2018 meeting.
Commissioners, any comments on the minutes, or shall we approve as written?
No comments.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
Yes.
All right. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The minutes are approved. Madam Clerk, next item.
3, GWP Commission staff comments.
Commissioners, any comments?
No, I don't have any comment.
I just wanted to make the comment that as I was driving here to the commission meeting this afternoon, I did receive a call on my cell phone from the Glendale Water and Power headquarters alerting me to the fact that we're having a heat emergency. So in light of that, if there's any way that we can conserve energy in this meeting today, I welcome it. If that means turning down some of the lights, so be it. But we are in a heat emergency. Commissioner Hale?
No comments.
Shall we move on to the next item?
Yes. 4A, water conservation update.
President Law, members of the Commission, my name is Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water, and I'm going to give an update on water conservation. And I'm going to go over, I've added a few more charts this time. I'm going to talk about monthly water use by customer type, annual water use by customer type, our annual production, really the continued savings we've had since 2015. And I've got a couple of charts where I'm going to show water consumption versus temperature, water consumption versus precipitation. And I've got one slide about the new conservation regulations that have come into place since our last meeting. And I show this chart each time we meet or each time I give an update on conservation. And, you know, really the orange line is single-family residential use, and the peaks are summer usage. And if we look at 2015, that's when we were on restricted water use of 2 days per week watering. And you can see prior to that shortage in 2015, the summer usage peaks were about the same. And since then, we've really had a drop. Right, so the three peaks since then are much lower than the three peaks prior, you know, and that really what that looks like is customers have been paying more attention to watering during the summer months, and maybe staying on like a 3-day-a-week watering schedule or some lower schedule. The green line's multifamily residential, the blue is commercial. And then the other uses are down there below. They're much lower uses. So I thought it would be good to plot at this time really just for annual, and it gives you some perspective on really what our main sales, our main use of water is residential, single family and multifamily. So prior to the shortages in 2015, single-family residential for an annual use amount was higher than multifamily. But over the last couple of years, that's dropped off, and single-family is actually, over the last few years, a little bit lower than the total annual usage for multifamily. And again, that's all related to outdoor water use. And then commercial's been pretty constant. And then you can really see that municipal and irrigation is like a very small part of the total amount that we sell each year in water.
Just for the benefit of those of us who are not close enough to really read those small
sorry about that.
notations, or who need new prescriptions,
all right.
can you just illuminate us as to each bar?
And I kept the colors the same as in that other chart, but
Okay.
the orange is single-family residential, the green is multifamily residential, the blue's commercial, red's irrigation, and then the purple is municipal.
So what it's really showing us, if I'm looking at the bars correctly, is that the biggest reductions are in the orange bars. Those are
Yep,
the most
single-family.
dramatic.
Yeah, single-family residential.
In the commercial, which is the blue, there's very little
Pretty
change.
constant,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Now, on this chart, this is just total monthly water production. So that's all the customer classes, but it's just broken out by year. So the two blues, the dark blue and the medium blue, that was before the shortage in 2015. 2015 is when we started adopting really restrictions, and that's the red line. So that's the lowest. Then green and purple are 2016 and 2017, and then orange is 2018. So we're up until June, we were kind of between that use in 2016 and 2017. And the reason that there's such a big dip in February of 2017 is it was raining for weeks on end. So it really seemed like customers went out and were paying attention and turned off their sprinklers during that time period. So to show that even more, you know, there's, and we talk about this, I talk about this a lot, but if our total use is lower in the winter, any kind of swing of a little bit more in the winter, a little bit less in the winter really changes that percentage. So you really can't look at on a month-by-month basis a percentage drop. It's really the cumulative amount that you have to keep. It's like a running total. So, so far, since the shortage in 2015, we're still about 18% below where we would have been had we been using water like we were prior to that. So when the state had mandatory cutbacks in 2015, you know, our target was right around 18%, and we actually overshot that. We're about 22%. But we're still, even as of a few years after that, 16, 17, and 18, we're still 18% below what we would have been cumulatively. And this really gets to that thing about the backsliding or whatever. Like, whenever you hear that, the math just doesn't add up. There's not backsliding. So we're still 18% below where we were. And again,
So
that's...
what was the reason for that? What was the reason for that?
The reason that we're below where we were, again, I think it's people paying more attention to their watering schedule.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's really outdoor. Like all those charts I was showing before, all the usage has gone down because of outdoor watering.
So they kept their habit.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, you know, is good news because, I mean, it makes your individual water bill lower if you're paying attention to how much you're using and you're just using the right amount for your irrigation. So. And then cumulatively, it's lower water use than we had been using. And really to talk about that more, again, there's my orange line again on single-family residential. And so it's the same orange line that was in the first graph that I showed. So we started 3 days per week watering in August 2014. Then we did 2 days per week watering in May of 2015 during that shortage. And then we went back to, we lifted those restrictions. But what happened in February of 2017, it was raining for weeks on end. So the thing that's really interesting about this is the red line's temperature. So what I'm plotting on two different scales is water use in HCF and temperature in degrees. So our water sales track almost exactly temperature, except when there's big precipitation events. So basically, you know, everyone goes outside and the plants look dry, it's warm out, I'm gonna up the sprinklers. You go outside, it's cooler, maybe I'll back off on the sprinklers, and that's why the use tracks that way. The other thing to note again is, like I was saying, in the prior 3 years, 12, 13, and 14, you know, those peaks were much higher. And then after that, after we had those mandatory restrictions, the peaks are lower. And then I plotted precipitation versus use of single-family residential. And really, it's the big rain events that get the usage to deviate from just temperature, just tracking temperature. So if it's raining outside, and you turn off your sprinklers, it drops. So they're in 2017, and so I'm plotting precipitation, I guess backwards or inversely compared to, right? Because I mean, the rain's falling down. I don't know, that's kind of how I plotted it. So during those big events, we get that big dip in usage in single family. So. And to give an update on the Making Water Conservation a California Way of Life, you know, for us, for utility, it's a lot more reporting to the state. We have probably about 4 people in our engineering section that are going through the rigs or taking training on the new reporting, and you know, it might be like, honestly, every year now, maybe like 2 full-time equivalents worth of time to do that reporting. So the initial targets are 55 gallons per day per person for indoor use, and those are going to ratchet down every year. The Department of Water Resources is going to give each utility access to aerial photography and estimates of irrigable land and irrigated land within each agency, and using those 2 numbers will calculate our water use target every year for our utility. And then along with that, the state's going to go through coming up with standards for efficient commercial use and efficient industrial use. And there was a lot of coverage or news coverage about fines and things like that. Those fines are to the water agencies, they're not to individual customers. And you know, this new regulation doesn't really affect the rates that we adopted because we didn't adopt budget-based rates. We still have similar tiers for single-family use. We have tiers for multifamily, and then just like flat rates for commercial and irrigation. So there'll be more, and I'll report on this a little bit more as we go along and have to start complying with those new regulations, really related to reporting for the most part. But again, that's all on the utility. It's not really targeted towards the customers. Then again, we still have, you know, go to our website. You can get different tips on how to save water. And there's a new program MWD has for turf removal. Again, they've budgeted for another turf removal program, and you can go online and take a look at that as well. So, and right now it's currently turf removal just for residential. And that's all I got. Commissioners, if you had any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Togetto. Commissioners, any questions?
No, it's clear.
All right. you very much. Should we move to the next item?
4B, customer service update.
Good afternoon, President Law and members of Commission. I'm Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator, and I'm here to provide you with the customer service update. We recently ended our fiscal year, so I thought I would share with you some of our accomplishments. First, we had the business process review. GWP contracted with West Monroe Partners to identify and recommend improvements as they relate to the organizational structure, business processes, and technology. They worked with us for about 12 weeks. They conducted interviews, they had workshops, they reviewed about 50 business processes, and ultimately they made about 16 recommendations, most of them related to automation. We're working through those and we'll be implementing them sometime this year. CS in Your Neighborhood, we held 4 events throughout Glendale. They were held on Saturdays, so Glendale residents could have the opportunity to learn about GWP billing and payment options. We helped teach them how to use those options, sign up for PVC programs, and we had staff there just so they could meet with staff and ask any questions that they wanted. The CIS operating system upgrade was a huge effort on the part of our business systems support team. Customer service was responsible for the user testing. So we ran parallel tests for absolutely all of our processes, billing, rate changes, imports, exports, service orders, everything that we do, we ran in parallel just to make sure that it was a successful implementation, which it was. And then we revamped our quality assurance program, which is the monitoring for our customer service representatives. Representatives are coached and trained separately, but we made changes to the scoring and dimensions for the calls reviewed, and as a group, the supervisors and the managers meet and calibrate the calls and discuss training needs. We also just completed a customer service remodel. Primarily, walls were removed to allow for better visibility, allowing groups to fit into one space. We had maybe 5 billing reps in one area and then a wall and then another 3 on the other side, so it wasn't really good for supervising staff. The environment's now open. We have designated training rooms and coaching rooms and new ergonomic workstations. And if you're familiar with a call center environment, you're at your desk almost all day long. So the workstations were a great improvement for safety and morale both. The organizational restructuring was a result of the business process review. Some of the back office functions in the call center and the billing section were overlapping, and so people weren't really focusing on their core responsibilities. So some of these functions have been moved to the administrative group within customer service. And then finally, as far as the recruitments, we promoted 3 CSRs to lead positions. They're working on the more complicated tasks and escalated issues. There's designated staff that just answer the phones now. We also just filled 2 vacancies in the call center. They've been with us for about 3 weeks, and they're completing a 6-week training program that covers about 30 different modules. The next several slides show the quantity of customer contacts. And over the past several years, we've seen a 16% decrease in the live telephone calls coming into the call center. In addition to these calls, there's approximately 63,000 calls that were completed in the automated system. And it's not that more callers are choosing the automated system over talking to a live rep, because we've also seen a decrease of 35% in our IVR calls. So customers are basically choosing other communication channels to contact GWP. In-office payments have dropped almost 10% since 2015. We do continue to have many customers that like to pay in person, but we do see an increase every year to our electronic payments, and we're up to 64% of all payments being made in some form of electronic payment, whether it's their personal banks, direct payment plan, the website, or over the IVR. As far as the web contacts, we're seeing an increase. Back in 2014, 15, that was unusually high at that time. That was because of the mandatory water conservation. So we had water waster reports. We had people asking questions about the mandatory water conservation. So it was unusually high for that year. But since then, we've seen a 25% increase. And these contacts come from different sources. We have contacts that come through GWP website. They also come through the city website, our mobile app, and then we have, not a lot, but some come through our different portals such as WaterSmart and OPower. But most of our contacts are still coming through the GWP website. At the front counter, we've served 11,000 customers. This is one area that really fluctuates year to year, primarily due to programs that we offer. We assist customers with general billing questions at the counter, but primarily customers seem to come in for new service applications, primarily those with new construction, because they also have to make a visit to our engineering office before they come down and apply for their new service. So those customers tend to come into the office. And then, of course, with the PVC programs, a lot of them want to have assistance in filling out their applications or have just additional questions about those programs. And then seasonally, we'll have an increase. For example, this month, we'll have an influx of customers that come in and they want verification of residency to enroll their children in Glendale Unified School District. So the front counter is always fluctuating based on what we have going on. One of the key objectives for the business process review was to recommend metrics for measuring performance and to conduct a benchmarking analysis. Their findings were that generally we were at par with municipal utilities and similar to peer utilities in the Los Angeles area. And these are just a sampling of the relevant benchmarks that can greatly impact our customers. For the contact center, you'll see that we made significant improvements in the fourth quarter, which was a direct result of our restructuring as well as our quality assurance initiative. So you can see the average talk time. The benchmark is 3 minutes and 41 seconds for first quartile. And you can see that our best quarter so far was the fourth quarter, and we're almost to first quartile at 3 minutes and 48 seconds. The average handle time first quartile is 4 minutes and 29 seconds, and our best so far this year was 4 minutes and 52 seconds. Average queue time first quartile is 1 minute, and we actually beat that at 43 seconds. And then we made huge improvements in the calls abandoned, with the top quartile being 4.4%, and we were at 2.9%. So some of the changes that we've made have made significant improvements in our performance. And then finally, for billing and collections, the review found that these functional areas outperformed the industry in these key metrics, and these are important metrics. So bill accuracy, top quartile, 99.9%. We're at 99.94%. And right after revenue, 0.3%, and we're at 0.13%. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Very good. Looks like things are moving in the right direction.
They are.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. Really appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next item.
5, oral communications. Discussion is limited to the items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Okay. I have a speaker card for Mr. Dan Brotman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How's everybody? I have 2 things. I'll see how the timing goes. But first is kind of a combination of a question and a request. And because Mr. Zern is not here, maybe somebody could take it to him, or I don't know who can answer it. Maybe you can answer it. But anyway, as you all, I'm sure, know, the RFP closed on Friday. And the question is, I'd be interested in finding out exactly what the process is now as far as informing the public about the results of the RFP. In particular, some things, and here's kind of my request, is I would like at the earliest possible date to know a few things, like first of all, how many proposals have come in altogether. I know of 6 or 7 just from conversations I've had with people that have submitted bids, but I would like to know the total number, and also some kind of a breakdown as far as, what kinds of solutions have been proposed. So how many are solar, how many are storage, how many are energy efficiency, demand response, and also broken down by whether these are, for instance, solar and storage projects at the Grayson site, or they involve other city-owned sites, or if they are distributed on private sites, whether they're solar storage or energy efficiency or demand response. And finally, the total amount of capacity that's been bid in. In addition to that, I'd like to know the entities that have bid. And finally, and I know this will take some time because, there's a lot to go through, I'm sure, but as we go through this process, for any bids that are rejected out of hand, in other words, they're rejected before there's any kind of a conversation with the bidder, it's important that we understand the rationale. What is it about that bid that was not acceptable to GWP? So, the earlier the better in getting this out. I know it's going to take time. I appreciate that. But it would be great to start seeing some of this as it's available, even if it's not, fully ready, and with as much time as possible before it's presented to this commission or the council, so that I have time to digest it. So that's kind of the request. I still have a couple minutes. I just wanted to ask another question, and this was the other day. I was at the city council meeting, and Councilmember Devine mentioned that GWP, during one of our high heat days, reached out to LADWP for some additional power, and and that request was rejected. There were 3 phone calls made, very brief 1-minute phone calls that were made between energy traders, one on our side and one on the LADWP side. I'd be interested in hearing more about the circumstances behind this. So was this purely precautionary, or were we at that point fully utilized on all of our resources? And if we were, kind of what did we end up doing, given the fact that LADWP said they didn't have anything that they could offer out? So just some information that would be helpful for me to understand. In particular, I'm doing more and more work looking at this issue between GWP and LADWP on supply of power, because it gets right to that issue of N-1-1 and the level of planning reserves that we really need. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brotman. That's all the cards that I have. Are there any further cards? Any further speakers?
I don't have a card.
Mr. Mark Boyajian. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, sir.
Yes, that was well.
Okay.
Great. Should I just commence, or?
Please start.
Great. I just wanted to introduce myself, Mark Boyajian. I am the managing partner of Arevia Power. I am one of the only Armenian-owned solar developers, majority-owned solar developers. We have our financial backing from Quinbrook Infrastructure Partners, where we have raised well over $20 million of development capital, and are currently closing with a couple of Southern Nevada IBW union pension funds for additional funds, and are in discussions with Southern California Union Pension Fund as well. Wanted to make an introduction as I am one of the companies that did bid into the RFP. One thing that I never got a clean answer on is, has there been an analysis done between the cost of an additional TSR that we would need to deliver to Airway versus becoming a NITS customer?
I'm sorry, can you define that term for us, please, TSR?
A transmission service request. So for us to deliver power from our project in Nevada at the 500 Crystal substation, which is owned by LADWP, we would need a TSR, a transmission service request, from Crystal to Rivaldi 500 in LADWP to then come up to Airway. This would be the typical stamp rate you would get from LADWP of $35 and change per kilowatt per year. I guess my question is, and I spoke to a couple of former folks at GWP, has there been an analysis done of what the network upgrades would be to become a NITS customer, a network customer of LADWP, versus the incremental amount that I would need to charge the city of Glendale to deliver power by issuing a TSR, a transmission service request? I believe, speaking to the former GM of Glendale DWP, or Glendale GWP, a few weeks ago, he said that there was a study done, and I would just like to make sure that it has been done and everyone knows what the apples-to-apples comparison is.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Anyone else desiring to speak? Okay, next item.
6, agenda forecast.
So I have a question, which is that the policy of this commission at this point is not to record public comments as part of the official record of the minutes of the meeting. And I would like to know if we could have a discussion about whether public comment should be included. Is it included, for instance, in city council meetings?
Madam President, members of the commission, the meeting minutes for the city council are action minutes, so there's not much of detail on any items, and there's
Okay.
no detail given on the, just it gives the names of the public speakers.
Okay,
And then it's just the action for the other items. It's
All
not
right.
a detailed blow by blow of what took place at the meeting.
got it, okay. What about with other commissions? In other words, is this just a policy amongst all commissions that public comment is, they only note the name of the speaker and not the content of what they say, or is this specific to our commission?
I would have to check on that. I'm not sure off the top, but I could certainly look into that and report
Okay.
back at the next meeting.
And my interest in asking this question is simply if people are going to pose questions, I think it's good to memorialize those questions so they can be addressed in future meetings, if that is deemed relevant.
That's certainly something this commission could decide to adopt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we put that on the agenda for a future meeting, please? And then separately, Steve, the general manager, Steve Zern, typically does give us an update on the current state of electrical demand and how the system is responding. But given that we are currently and for the foreseeable future going to be in a high heat event, I would really like to have a detailed update on the state of our energy resources, basically, and how we're coping with this excess heat. And specifically, what are the demands on Grayson? And for instance, I was unaware of this call being placed to LADWP and the fact that we were not able to access that energy. So I would be very curious to know, how the system is holding up given the demands that are being placed on it.
Got it, okay.
Also, I know that we were going to receive an update just on the, sort of a bare bones outline of where we were with the RFP, for instance, the number of responses. But I think the more detail we can have about that, the better. Commissioners?
I concur in all of those agenda items, so I don't have any
Okay.
other changes.
All right.
That's good.
Are there any GWP staff here today who just could give us a brief update on the state of the electrical system, or is no one's available? I mean, the lights are on, so we've got cool air circulating. But yeah, I think we're all concerned. Are we comfortable with going into October 1st? Does anyone see a need for a September meeting?
Yeah, I don't see anything on here that is so urgent that I
Okay.
think we need to schedule
All
a
right.
special, but should something come up, I think all of us would
Yeah.
make ourselves available.
Okay. All right. With that, I think we're comfortable with the agenda items we discussed. I think we're comfortable with proceeding. Madam Clerk?
7, adjournment.
Motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.